You may begin.
All right. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Please mute your microphone and stand for the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. City Clerk, please call the roll.
Yes, Chair Klein,
Present.
Vice Chair Andrioli,
Present.
Commissioner Soktova,
Present.
Commissioner Williams,
I'm here.
Commissioner Baca. I don't think he's joined us. Commissioner Condon. Commissioner Larios. You have a quorum with Commissioner Baca, Condon, and Larios not yet present.
Thank you. City Clerk, do we have any changes to the agenda?
There are none.
May I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved, Vice Chair Andrioli.
Is there a second?
I will second Commissioner Sachdeva.
Thank you.
Motion by Vice Chair Andrioli, second by Commissioner Sachdeva to approve the agenda. I'll call the roll. Chair Klein,
Approved.
Vice Chair Andrioli,
Yes.
Commissioner Sachdeva,
Yes.
Commissioner Williams,
Yes.
motion carries.
Now we will take public comments from members of the audience. If you'd like to provide a public comment through Zoom, please click the raise hand button.
I'll give the attendees just a moment to raise their hand. We have no raised hands.
Okay, we'll now go to presentations.
Item number 1 is fiscal year 2022-23 proposed budget overview. And City Administrator Fangino and Finance Director Williams will present the item. And I believe Commissioner Condon has arrived. Commissioner Condon, are you? There you are. I see you. Okay. Carlos Scott.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us this morning. We're going to give you an overview of our fiscal year budget. The budget runs from July through the end of June. And so this fiscal year's budget will be presented to the panel for their review. And I'll turn it over to Scott. Thank you.
Let me get my screen shared. Okay, that seemed to be paginating properly. Right, so good morning, Honorable Chair and Commissioners. Thank you for the opportunity to present, as City Administrator mentioned, our fiscal year 2022 and 23 budget, just for review as we present to the Commission each year. Now, this is informational, but it always highlights the point that so goes the city, so goes the business community, and what as the city is doing well and on the right trajectory in terms of financial stability, that of course bodes well for the community in terms of the services, the public safety and infrastructure provided. So this is the same presentation that we presented at the last budget workshop. There's one more upcoming workshop for the council, but again, each year we like to bring this forward informational. So please consider it interactive. We can stop anytime to note some of the details. We don't have to wait till the end should the commission have any questions. So we start with the the drivers behind our budget when we put together the document, when we begin our analysis, which actually begins early in the calendar year. For our first kickoff of workshops in April. And it involves, as you can see, both short and long-term strategies. So we looking in the near term, this covers the upcoming fiscal year. This is a financial plan, but our short-term plan always has to underpin the long-term strategy. And so, as noted there, that long-term, the goal and the direction from the city administrator is first and foremost fiscal accountability. This goes for all of us as department heads, and each year at the audit, we see that reflected in the audited financial statements, that every department is very disciplined about managing the resources available to them. Long-term strategy involves sustainability in the form of building reserves, reserves for unforeseen and uncertainty. And as a long-term strategy is also the element of operational efficiency. We're always looking inward as an organization to evaluate how operations can be better performed. So in the short term, we mentioned there, and I say this for last, the management of uncertainty. So 2 years ago, when we were putting budget together and we were at the very beginnings of the state of emergency, we didn't know what to expect in the upcoming years. And as the commission is aware, we weathered that very well, having so many essential services or essential businesses within the city. But now we face a whole different set of potential uncertainties. We all see what is going on in the markets. We're over a year now with cost escalations that have really ramped up, and they're everywhere in the news in the last few months. And these are things that we have to carefully look at and evaluate and address. So naturally, borrowing costs, we see the costs of fuel, as well as supplies and services. So the short-term strategy, the element within short-term strategy of optimization of resources, we really have to put a fine point on that. So this is just philosophically what underpins all of the numbers and the estimates that you'll see in the next few slides. So we start with our general fund expenditures. And in the leftmost column here, you see our current fiscal year, and that we will be wrapping up, as Carlos mentioned, June 30. So our proposed budget is in the middle column, and then you simply see the delta on the far column. So in terms of salaries and benefits, these are normal, addressing the MOUs that are already in place, step increases, cost of living, and so forth, as well as pension costs, which is something that we always have to manage as a public agency. So these are both pension and post-retirement costs. We have a couple of footnotes that we'll reference on the next slide with some of the particulars, including some large capital projects, largely funded with grant funding, but that accounts for the majority of the year-over-year swing. In other words, the ongoing operational, what it costs to just run the city with our services and supplies hasn't changed all that much. So here are just a couple of notes. We already mentioned the post-retirement benefits, but supplies and services, this was mentioned yesterday in the business breakfast meeting, the savings that is associated with Los Angeles County Fire, but of course, built into the contract is the increases to their costs each year. So there's no surprise there, that's already budgeted. There are some other miscellaneous items, including environmental cleanup that has been added. And then most notable in terms of dollars are the increase in capital. And again, this is the deployment of resources that is going to benefit the city in terms of its infrastructure. So we're at the beginnings of a pavement management plan that will span 5 years, and it is significant. But once completed, this is improved. These are improvements to our city streets that are going to last for decades. So general fund revenue, where does it come from? We're taking that amount that you saw on the previous table and just distributing it. So the majority are taxes and licenses. And services or charges for services represent a fairly small amount. And then there's administrative overhead associated with the utility, but the majority of general fund is taxes. And that is differentiated from rates, where taxes are general in nature. This is the most flexible fund we have as the city's primary operating fund. And so that means that anyone within our borders benefits from the services provided. Again, safety and infrastructure. So when we have upwards or in excess of 50,000 entering our city each day, they benefit from these. That's different from the revenue we'll look at associated with the utilities in a couple slides. And where do the expenditures go? This is a distribution of the first table we looked at. And what you see here is public safety, form of police, fire, contract, as well as public works. So you see the majority of this pie, more than 50%, represents safety and infrastructure. And if you count capital outlay, now you're at the vast majority of the available resources and how they're spent, and a much lesser amount to actually operating in terms of overhead. This is a look, a breakdown of funding for those capital expenditures that were mentioned. So there is the use of fund balance, but as you can see, there's a significant amount with grants. This is something that we always want to aggressively go after. And there's no guarantee of grant funds, but this is given to us as a priority, and it's something that we're always looking for, and primarily in both public works and public safety. A look at our enterprise funds. This is all put together, and again, same format where we have the current year budget that this fiscal year ending June 30, and then if adopted, this will begin 7/1. And again, year over year changes relative to the whole are actually fairly flat. These are MOUs and the expected increases already in place. What you do see is an increase to supplies and services. And as you'll see from some detail in slide or two, this is primarily related to the cost of energy.
Hey, Scott, I'm sorry,
Sure.
Jack Klein here. So the capital for the enterprise funds goes down by 5.8. The capital required for the overall budget goes up 6.8. Just because I don't understand maybe what the enterprise fund expenditures mean. Can you explain that a little more?
Yeah, and you'll see on a slide or two where the funding from this comes from. So 2 years ago, we issued both electric and water bonds. And so we had just a few years to deploy those funds. So there were larger projects. So in the water fund, there were several either rehab or new. So those represented a significant amount, as well as various projects in the electric utility. And it just means that we've utilized those funds, and there's just less projects as a result of that. So there was a bit of a ramp up. There's always a long list, but we're always up against resources, even in terms of time and staffing to be able to do that. But that's primarily what it represents, the use of bond funds.
Great, thank you for the explanation. Enterprise funds essentially is power and water. Is that?
Yeah, I mean, our four enterprise, electric, water, gas, and fiber, but the majority is electric, and then after that, water.
Got it. Thank you very much.
Sure. And here are some details. So we see some of the changes reflected in those columns. Now, one of them was the acquisition of Malberg. So one thing to note is while we had the increase in staffing, the savings is down below in operations, even though we see an increase year over year with operations. That's the cost of energy. It is the savings, and as noted, is offset by the PPTA, the removal of the PPTA in the exchange. And again, Carlos talked about this in yesterday's meeting. But there were a number of elements that brought that together, including the state of the market last year, November, December. And this is part of the future of the utility. It was thought to be a great choice at the time, a decision to go forward, but it has just continued to demonstrate that. And so you simply see a shift in expenditures, but in the long run, what you have is independence for the utility, and really having much more active control regarding its future. And that's what the nature of that investment. Again, this is part of what we discussed at the beginning in terms of both near-term, midterm, long-term strategy. If you follow natural gas futures, I mean, they're all over the board actually in terms of volatility, but the escalations are significant. All of our SCAPA member agencies are dealing with this, and the utility is budgeting within this budget is reflected partnering with the business community to absorb those costs in this upcoming fiscal year. They're significant. We're trying to manage it as best we can, various strategies. There's no one thing that's going to solve it. But I think the takeaway is that reflected in this budget is the use of resources to partner with the business community to get through these, hopefully what turn out just to be near and midterm challenges with the cost of energy. And we mentioned capital, and this was the question just asked. So there's a decreased year over year as the bond funds were completed. I'll look at revenue. No surprise here. The vast majority of it is electric, but all the other utilities are reflected here in terms of what they collect. And then again, no surprise, where do those funds go? And cost of sales, that is just the vast majority. Principal retirement, we have a shift from one type of expenditure to paying this debt down. Commission is probably aware we stayed very much on the short end of the spectrum because per the city administrator's direction, the way that Malberg was structured is that it would follow what would have been the PPTA going to term. That way, there is this dramatic, very, very significant decrease in indebtedness at the end of that 7 years. Again, it just puts us in a great position for success as these bonds are paid off toward the end of this decade. Capital outlay. So there is a fund balance used, but we had mentioned before the bonds that were issued. So we're finishing up what's left of those. And the reason this is good news is because the bonds were issued in such a different time than right now, just with the Fed having to get control of inflation. There's just no way we would be issuing these bonds today. The market has very much turned. So we had very favorable financing, and we were able to put these funds to use. And of course, staff got this done very quickly. So these are our highlights and takeaways. The primary principle with our operating budget is what we refer to as a structurally balanced budget. What this means is ongoing and continuous. So not the one time, like the acquisition of a plant or a major capital, but the ongoing and continuous expenditures are met by ongoing and continuous revenue. That is the formula that enables us to build reserves and to be on a path of long-term financial stability, which is what is important to our community to be able to provide the services and infrastructure and safety that it does at the levels that they do. There is a continuous activity. So it's not as if we wait till the end of next year, fiscal year, and figure out how things went. This is something that we literally watch on a weekly basis. Carlos is advised to any unusual activity. We watch revenues and monitor them very carefully, as well as these on the cost side. So and then we report at mid-year, but if necessary, if things began to change enough, you might see a quarterly report, and just for the purpose of update.
What's that?
And finally, infrastructure improvements. Again, this is to maintain the level of service to our business community and its residents. And then on the general fund side, setting aside some of those reserves for special purposes, and most notably, one is the establishment of the economic uncertainties reserve, and that is we have these on the next. Yes. So what you see here are the same reserves but rather than being just in one place, to have them set aside for specific purposes. I think there's, in the age of volatility, we can't emphasize the need enough to continue building a reserve for uncertainty. I think we live in the age of volatility and uncertainty. So the purpose of that is so that it is there if there should be a state of emergency or some financial shocks or just something unexpected in the market, so that we're not caught flat-footed, but we have time to respond. That's what that's there for, or even a natural emergency, disaster or emergency. Capital, again, we deposit to this account to build up. We talked about the long-term streets project, streets maintenance that will span years. So as we do well on a given fiscal year, we want to build up this account for that purpose. And so when it is time to deploy those funds, they're there. And there's no question, it really isn't mingled with the operational budget. Same thing goes for post-retirement obligations. It's both on the pension and the health benefits side. Technology, so much of what we do involves that, both for public safety as well as our internal services here. And fleet. There is more and more shift to electric vehicles. We have an aging fleet, and we want that to be something that doesn't hit us so hard in any one year. In terms of time horizon, so there have been a couple of these workshops presented to the council. There will be one more meeting. And then after that, the final budget will be presented to the council and a public hearing at that time. And if adopted, it will go into effect July 1st. So that concludes our overview, and we open it up to the panel for any questions or discussion.
My question on the reserves, the 10 million bucks total,
Mhm.
how far along are we in those reserves at this point?
That these reflect, if adopted, which thus far this is going forward, but this will be the level in each of those buckets.
Okay, so they don't. There's no existing special purpose reserves. This is a new item.
Yes, that's correct. It's for the purpose of really stratifying them, isolating them, and identifying these needs, so that we're prepared when as these needs come up. These needs don't tend to fall neatly within a fiscal year, oftentimes.
Right, but we don't have any of these reserves right now. I mean,
That's correct.
We're not doing any reserves.
Well, it's
That fall into
reflected in
these
the fund
categories.
balance. Yeah,
Okay.
we're looking at a fund balance saying, you know, instead of just sitting there in one unidentifiable amount, we have those that are restricted for things like streets. We acquired a grant or something like that, and they have to be used a certain way. But for those that are available, we're making the recommendation that we begin doing this each year. So the timing of addressing these going forward will be at mid-year, actually. And that's because at that time, we have audited financials, and these will not be estimates, but they're audited, they're concrete numbers. We know how much cash that we literally have in reserve, and then make the recommendations. Let's add to uncertainties, or we know these upcoming projects. I mean, we know the cost over the next 5 years for the streets improvements. So that's going to be something that we want to be adding to as we complete our upcoming fiscal years.
Okay, so the expectation is that these are going to be increasing beyond 5 million bucks for economic uncertainty every year as you can do it. That's the idea?
That would be my recommendation. Yes, to continue adding to them.
Thank you.
If I could just add a couple of things, the city many years ago had aging infrastructure in the electric system and also on the water side. And so we went out and put a plan together in order to address those issues. We had addressed the the aging pipes and wells and boosters that we had on the water system. And then we had on the electric side, we had aging poles and cable and all sorts of stuff. So we went ahead and we addressed those two issues. In this year's budget, you see us finally addressing some of the streets and repaving project, and that's about $4 million, and it's a big improvement, but it's well deserved, and the city streets do need repaving, and we pushed this off since 2016. So it's been ongoing, and we've been doing patchwork in between to try to keep the streets up to standards. And then the other major capital improvement we have is obviously the Atlantic Bridge, and most of that is the revamping of the Atlantic Bridge and widening it. But we do get a lot of grant funds for that project. And then we continue to do capital work on the electric side. And again, that goes to reliability. We want to ensure that we're able to have the highest reliability rate here in the city for our customers to keep the electricity going. So, but as far as reserves, we recognize that we did have a surplus, but we do want to allocate that money for uncertainty. In other words, we just don't want to go out and spend it, and we don't want to go out and use the money without understanding how is it going to improve the needs of the city. So with that, if you have any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer.
Yeah, I mean, and as to underscore what Carlos says, just this is a very systematic approach. And the systematic approach begins with what we talked about at the very beginning, is that every department is directed to take managing their budget very seriously, even those of us with relatively smaller budgets, because we're internal services. It doesn't matter, it all makes a contribution. And with every department contribution, it adds to these resources. So again, it's a systematic approach that bodes well for the business community in the out years. That's what these reserves are for.
So I'm sorry to be so thick. So assuming that your continued good stewardship works and financials end up kind of the same each year, this in 10 years would grow to $100 million total. Is that kind of the idea?
I would, so a couple of thoughts on that. Of course, if we were finishing to the good that much, 10 million a year, that is entirely possible. I would say that's highly unlikely. And it's because markets are a matter of cycles. I think that it's there is more and more discussion of an upcoming recession. And the date keeps getting moved closer and closer to us. And I would hope that we still finish to the good, just because we're being cautious, we budget conservatively. But that could be an example, depending on severity, of when perhaps we finish a little bit negative or just kind of right on the money. And so in a year like that, it's just status quo. Now, there's another couple of factors that could impact the budget, reserves to the good, and that would be economic development. Now, there's no guarantee of that, but as certain businesses come into town, could be very significant. And rather than just building up what could be unlimited reserves, Carlos mentioned yesterday that this is something that's evaluated along the way. There could come a time when, if a measure was sunsetting, that we evaluate the actual level of need at that time as the revenue structure has changed. But the trend for most cities is that expenditures, that at least the rate of increase is increasing considerably faster than the rate of increase you see on the revenue side. We've been fortunate and we've done well, and the last couple of years, but some of the reserves, and I don't want to by any stretch suggest that all of it, but some has been the timing during the state of emergency with the delivery of large purchases. We've had vehicles that we've ordered 2 years in a row that that Ford, for instance, just simply could not deliver because of things like the chip shortage and stuff like that. Other times there were delays related to the state of emergency itself. So if a capital project is postponed, of course, that's going to add to reserve. And I think it underscores the importance of identifying and calling out specific reserves so that rather than just seeing a large fund balance continue to increase, you might see specific buckets increase. And again, all of these are policy decisions. These are my recommendations. This isn't my decision to do this. I'm simply making the recommendation. So they're all up for discussion. But at the same time, it's every one of these is with a future-oriented perspective.
Thank you.
Tom Condon here. I go back to when I first came to Vernon, which was in the mid 80s. And I think Bethlehem Steel had shut down. It had been demolished. She started to see some development on the south side of Vernon. And then as time went on, all of a sudden, not all of a sudden, the city realized they lost this big, huge revenue in electric power with Bethlehem Steel. And that's what kind of precipitated the warehouse tax eventually. And so as I look at the budget and I think about how important we all know how important electrical sales are to the city. And then I think about how land in the city of Vernon is now approaching $200 per square foot. I think we have a site or two in escrow at over $200 a foot. And then you see the unbelievably high lease rates that have been just, metrics we've never seen. I think Jack it's crazy. The real estate market is absolutely crazy. And so then it makes me wonder, and just kind of want to recommend to the city that really at this point in time with real estate being so expensive to really pay attention. And I'm sure you do. And I'm sure you realize the value, I know you do, of these large manufacturers in the city and these large power users. And if there was ever a time to be in touch with them, to reach out to them, to let them know that you're willing to do whatever it is to keep their business, I think today's the day, because the costs of operating in a city like Vernon, I just had one client that occupies maybe 150,000 square feet of space in Vernon, and then another couple hundred in Commerce. And we just leased a 425,000 square foot building in Charleston, South Carolina, because they couldn't face the prospects of the high lease rates for their business going down the road. So I'm just commenting on that aspect of the real estate market. And I think it's, go back to what happened with Bethlehem Steel. And I think it's really important that the city doubly reaches out to these large manufacturers.
Thank you, and I'll let Carlos comment on that. But if there is anyone from the utility on, we could also hear from them, because I do know that this is while it doesn't necessarily come out of my office, I know that there is an active activity with the business community. So it's noted with me, and also discussed that with BPU.
Yeah, I'll just add that we have a tremendous amount of outreach going on right now with the business community, even on the electric side. But I will tell you this, that we recognized that, you know, back in the 1980s when Bethlehem Steel did leave the city and we did lose a majority of their revenue, there was a big shortfall on the general fund side for many years, and the city relied on the electric utility to fill those gaps on the general fund side to pay for fire, police, and all the other services that were needed on the general fund side. And that's how, you know, this power plant basically came to fruition, to build it in the early 2000s, because the city was trying to generate additional revenue to feed the general fund. What our plan has been, and my plan with the department heads has been, is to put together a solid foundation so that the general fund does not have to rely on electric utility revenues. And I think it's been working over the last couple of years, and you can see that that if you look at the revenues that have been coming in on the general fund side, it's solidifying what we have on the general fund. So outreach is very important. And again, our number one goal is to keep our businesses and provide a competitive advantage for them to be in Vernon and provide the highest quality service. But we will continue outreach, and we will continue reaching out to each and every business as they come into Vernon and as they are in Vernon, to ensure that we meet their needs and we can help them be successful.
You know, one of the things on that point regarding the general fund at our really over the last 2 years, but specifically this last November, December, when we presented to the rating agencies for our bond issuances, because these analysts have been around and they know the history of Vernon, and they've watched all of this, and they're looking in great detail at both our operations as well as the financial results, as well as our solvency and cash balances. And as Carlos mentioned, that was a lot of the point of discussion with these rating agencies and these outside stakeholders, ultimately the investors. And it's what I refer to as kind of the story of two Vernons. There is the utility, but there also has to be an isolation between the general government. And one of the just stellar points that we've been able to point out that has occurred in the last 6 years specifically has been the health and independence of the general fund. And it's critically important for the city's future that the general fund stand on its own 2 feet in that way, alongside of course, the health and success of the utility. That's always a priority. But coming alongside this has been a different approach over the last 6 years, and we're absolutely on the right track. That's my assessment.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the commission? Okay, I think that concludes this report.
Thank you very much. We'll now go to the consent calendar. All matters listed on the consent calendar may be approved with one motion. Items may be removed from the consent calendar by any commissioner. Those items removed will be considered immediately after the consent calendar. Do any commissioners want to pull an item from the consent calendar? I'll assume that's no. Are there any public comments on the consent calendar?
For those on Zoom, please use the raise hand feature if you'd like to make a comment. We have no raised hands.
May I have a motion for consent calendar item number 2?
So moved, Vice Chair Andrioli.
Is there a second?
Yes, Tom Condon.
All right.
Motion by Vice Chair Andrioli, seconded by Commissioner Condon to approve the consent calendar. I'll call the roll. Chair Klein,
Yes.
Vice Chair Andrioli,
Yes.
Commissioner Sachdeva,
Yes.
Commissioner Williams, Commissioner Williams, we'll come back to him. Commissioner Condon,
Yes,
motion carries.
All right. We will now go to new business.
Item number 3 is the public safety special parcel tax item, and City Administrator Fandino and Finance Director Williams will present the report.
So we appreciate you taking the time today and to hear out the special parcel tax. Again, this tax was passed by the voters in 2013 with the 10-year sunset of 2023. The tax was intended to fund certain activities with the fire department, police department, and health department. The tax is approximately $2 million of revenue to the city a year. And we're asking for input from the commissioners today on how to structure a plan going forward. We're asking for the tax to be approved by the voters, but we're also looking for your input on how to structure this moving forward. I know there's issues with the warehouse tax, and the safety parcel tax was intended to kind of wrap up some of or capture some of the businesses that weren't truly participating or assisting the city with fire, police, and health. I know that the Vernon Fire Department is no longer at Vernon and we use LA County, but we still have to pay for services with LA County. So again, we'd like you to listen to the presentation and then provide feedback and comments. We did introduce this yesterday at the business breakfast meeting, but this is the first commission that's hearing about this tax. And if city council moves forward and approves it with recommendations and/or we go on that timeline, then it would be something that would be added on to the April election of 2023 or 2022. I'm sorry, 2023, April 2023. So it is a little bit out, but we want to get ahead of the curve and we want to make sure that we get information out to the commission to give them the ability to give us input. So I'll turn it over to Scott.
Good morning, and thank you again for the opportunity to present. So not only do we have city administrator and myself, but we also have our chief of police will comment at, and we also have Freddie, our director of health, standing by should there be any questions. This is a unique opportunity to present to the commission because it's really on the front end of this. As Carlos said, it's early, but there's a lot of moving parts and there's a lot of considerations whenever something is put before the voters. And so this is being brought forward before any policy decisions and looking for input. So again, same as last time, meant to be informative and interactive. So feel free to stop with any questions or comments. A little bit of background, a little more detail of what Carlos mentioned, and the impetus. begins with some of our general fund revenue streams, and we're different than a lot of our surrounding cities. There's only a handful of cities in the gateway, the 27 gateway cities, that are what kind of is referred to as no-low property tax cities. And the comparison, or more accurately, the contrast between surrounding cities or nearby cities is stark. So with the assessed value of property tax, with a limited increment increase based on Prop 13 going back to the late 70s, that 1% is what's left to be divided up among all of the area, all of the agencies within the impact zone. So that's everything from a mosquito or vector-based abatement to the city or county or other agencies. And so from that 1%, the city receives its share. And here's where the problem enters in. And Vernon receives right at about 7%. Compared with other cities that receive in excess of cities right next door, in excess of 20% of that. So this is significant. This puts a natural hindrance on the ability. So again, to put it another way, the last 10 years, and it was mentioned earlier what's happening with real estate, and it has been stunning. I mean, after the great crash, who would have thought that we would have so quickly returned to those and far exceeded those highs of the last run up? Well, that increment for the non-no-low cities, they had to do little more than just collect those additional revenues because of what happened to property value, but relative to the percent, it's much less for Vernon. That's not going to change. I have looked in great detail at what it would take for that percentage to change, and essentially it would take like about 13 different governments to all agree to give us more, which of course isn't going to happen. So that's a challenge. Another is that we have revenues that are largely population based. So you have a very tangible example here of streets. So Vernon receives so little in terms of streets revenues, and with everything that's involved in the audit, I sometimes question if it's even worth it. When you look at, even though our daytime population is at parity with these other nearby cities, but because those who work in Vernon, tens of thousands who work in Vernon don't necessarily live here or do not live here, the revenues for streets is practically nothing. So you can see this contrast between HP. These are all part of our challenges, and they've always existed. So as Carlos alluded to earlier, what has been done in the last 5 to 6 years? And as we mentioned, as part of our strategy, our long and short-term strategy is looking inward at operational efficiencies. So we're managing on the expenditure side, but you can't, as you all are aware as business people, you cannot just simply cut your way out of trouble. So there were also revenues that were introduced.
Hey, Scott, can I ask a question? This is
Sure.
Jimmy. Just a question on the 7% of property tax revenues,
Mhm.
provided by the county. How did that come into play? Was that a bad negotiation when Vernon was incorporated, or how did we end up that way when there's other cities adjacent to us that are doing much better than that?
So it actually, it's probably impossible to know precisely why. It's actually an excellent question, but it's the fact that it happened over 100 years ago, or about 100 years ago. And I will say, having been a part of another gateway city that's NOLO, I can tell you for them at their incorporation at about 100 years ago, it was based on the petroleum industry. And so a conscious decision was made because they were, if you recall the early days of the region, Porcupine Hill and all of that, it was worth it to them to just get these tens of thousands of oil derricks in their borders. And so they made the conscious decision to not tax, to take the lower property tax. That was an example. In terms of Vernon, there may have been some incentive. There may have been in some of those large heavy industries that there were auto manufacturers. Maybe there were tangible reasons that way back when, but this goes a long way back, and I wouldn't be surprised if the actual decisions were made 100 years ago. But
Thank you.
You're welcome. But once done, it's done. I mean, it is literally near impossible, pretty much impossible to undo this.
As a follow-up, for the local streets and roads funding, you make a pretty good point there that, Huntington Park receiving a substantially different amount than we are, and even though they're smaller, is there any way to address that from a city government perspective?
Now, there is, and we have city admin, and I saw Angela on the call as well. We participate in various working groups in Sacramento as part of League of City. And this is one of those to address to address from the point of view of fairness and equity. Because if you look, for instance, at what Vernon produces, it towers over the top of the nearby cities, and yet we're almost punished for achievement. And you could even make the argument, what's more, based on the business in town, we have more trucks and things like that. So we're taking on more damage, or more wear and tear, more maintenance, more damage, and because of what's in place. So streets actually, there are working groups, but those changes don't come easily, because if you think about it, what you're probably asking to do is take the same pie and redivide it in a more fair and equitable way.
I think you make a really good, case with this. And I think that it's something that maybe, the commissions and the city, and the city council need to get behind if we're not. But, we are generating a lot of revenue for the state out of Vernon, in terms of sales tax and things like that out of the businesses here that, is probably contributing a lot more, I would venture to say, than perhaps some of the more residential adjacent cities, yet we're not receiving those same funds back to support the infrastructure that is needed. It does seem very, inequitable towards the businesses that are generating it, and certainly towards the residents here in Vernon as well.
Without question. And I just wanted to give Angela a chance to chime in about the working groups, because it's not a perfect science, but it's important activity.
Right, Jimmy, you've exactly hit an issue that's a legislative priority for the city. We are constantly advocating for parity, for cities that their daytime population varies significantly from their residential population. That's really not something unique to Vernon. I mean, to the degree is unique for Vernon, but we are part of a coalition of smaller cities like Palm Springs, cities that are smaller communities, but their daytime populations are significant, usually with this particular coalition due to like tourism, right? They have a lot of people coming in. And just because those people aren't residents doesn't mean that the city is not still obligated to supply services for the people that visit their cities, and the money that they spend in those cities that also contributes to the state budget. So this is something that we talk about at every meeting at the Capitol in Sacramento and in DC. And we are, working really hard to find a legislative kind of fix to help balance the scales for cities like Vernon and other smaller residential population cities that have very high daytime populations because of usually tourism. As far as I know, we're the only ones who have this same scenario, but due to industry versus tourism.
Yeah, no one's quite like Vernon.
Yeah. Well, Angela and all of the city staff, I would definitely urge you to reach out to some of the businesses here in Vernon about this. I mean, I certainly was very unaware of this discrepancy, but a lot of us have great relationships with our, legislators and regulators, and we can certainly, chime in and bring in our voices as well, as constituents. So I'd certainly, beseech you guys to reach out to the businesses in Vernon and let us know that this is the case, and let us know how we can impact that at the state level, because I think it's important we all work together on that.
Absolutely. And as part of the redistricting, when our new elected officials officially start to represent us after this, the June primary, that'll be an effort that we'll be ramping up, doing tours and meet and greets with our new elected officials. So we'll be reaching out to our business community because we need you to tell our stories, and beyond just driving the streets of city of Vernon to see how different it is. We found that the visitors really like to hear from the businesses. And so we'll be reaching out to your businesses to help us with tours and education for our new incoming elected officials. So that's more to come on that.
Thank you. So, and really to I don't mean to add fuel to this point of limited resources, but during the state of emergency, you hear about some cities that were literally rescued, both federal and state funds, and we received effectively nothing. I mean, yeah, it's $50,000, which we used and put to very good use with the vaccination activities, but yet relative to hundreds of thousands that were received in nearby cities, or tens of millions that were received in some other larger cities, just based on that variable that Angela just pointed out. So, all right. So what was done? We've addressed this both on the revenue and expenditure side, and the results have been very effective in terms of the general fund. And it's the trajectory it's been on for more than half decade, bringing us to this present time. So as Carlos mentioned, Measure L was approved coming up on 10 years ago. And as noted in the details of the resolution, it had these three areas of concentration. There's fire services, there's health services activities, and the commission is aware that we're one of only like 4 cities in California that have this benefit of our own health and environmental department, which, given the significant regulation and compliance activity, this is just another distinctive of Vernon. And then, of course, what is really felt by the businesses are police services. So the maximum tax rate is 3% per square foot of parcel area. This is differentiated from the warehouse tax, but it functions very similarly where it is an add-on to the property tax, and we follow the CPI to make that adjustment, and the maximum rate each year can be set at the council's discretion. It's notable, and as I have talked through this with Carlos, obviously the commission is well aware that CPI is off the charts, and so there is not the recommendation to adjust this to the extent that the ordinance allows. That just would be too steep and year over year. And again, it's just another example of the city partnering with the business community.
I'm sorry, Scott, what is it right now? It's the maximum is it 3 cents right now?
Well, that was the basis, and then it has adjusted each year based on CPI.
Right. Do you know what it is right now?
I have my staff on the call if they let me see if they have that handy. Jessica or Angela, do you have the actual, are you able to cite the rate? But if not, we'll bring that information back.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. I'll bring that rate back. And of course, it sunsets next this upcoming fiscal year, as Carlos mentioned. At this point, I am going to let the chief. Okay, I just got a note that they're looking up in the background. So as soon as I see that, I'll cite the rate. In terms of potential impacts, we wanted to give the chief a couple of minutes to just comment on some of what we see happening within the county. We heard a little bit of this yesterday morning, but this parcel tax has very specific purposes, and we thought we'd like to hear from the chief himself on this.
Thank you, Scott, and good morning to all the commissioners. Nice to have seen some of you yesterday in person, and I'm happy to be here. Just for background, I've been chief now going on, believe it or not, close to a year, but I've been with the police department for the last 25 years. So Vernon is somewhere where I've grown up and somewhere we take great pride, and I take great pride in keeping it safe. Some of the challenges, it's no secret that in the last 2 years, law enforcement in general has seen a lot of change, a lot of reform, and obviously that gets pushed down into the law enforcement agencies to implement. Property crime is no secret. You may have seen that in the larger LA County area is up. Fortunately, in the city of Vernon, we've seen a small increase. What we haven't seen, and we're happy about that, is our violent types of crimes where your assaults and robberies and stuff like that have not jumped. So we're happy about that. Obviously, the increase in crime we're not happy about, and I know how that is a challenge for your businesses. Last thing I want is for you to come in the morning and find out that something was stolen from your property or something was vandalized, and we're doing our best to mitigate that. It's also no secret that the increase in the homeless population throughout LA County has affected Vernon. We've seen an increase in the number of homeless individuals walking through Vernon, making Vernon home. And in connection to that, the mental health crisis connected. And we're quickly getting our staff trained. I think most of us are now at this point to deal with that. I wanted to add, and some that are on the call may not be aware, but we were able to secure some funding through the HOST program that LA County runs. And with that money now, we've got teams of officers that go out Mondays and Fridays. We partner with the Department of Mental Health. We put them in our police cars and we're out visiting these locations where we know we have folks that are experiencing homelessness or having a mental health crisis. I'm hoping to move in the next couple of months, maybe look at creating a full-time position. But we'll see how that rolls out. But for right now, we're at least getting out there twice a week, dedicated to address our homeless, outside of the increase in calls of dealing with our homeless and the mental crisis that you see sometimes throughout the Vernon. Increase in emergency response time. Fortunately, our response time to our priority 1 calls have remained flat. We're at about 3 minutes and 30 seconds. So something we're very proud about here in the city of Vernon. Your priority 1 crimes are your crimes, basically your crimes in progress, your robberies in progress, your violent assaults in progress, your burglaries in progress, those types of things. So we prioritize those calls, obviously. The increase in response time is more in relation to your non-priority calls. Our call volume has increased significantly because of the increase in crime, the increase in homelessness, and those types of things. So those calls that are not considered a priority 1 call are held for a little bit longer. With relation to that, we want to make sure that we have sufficient staffing to address that response time. Public safety parcel tax is important to the police department because it funds part of our services. And then the last point there, where it touches on limited resources to administer necessary health services and projects. I've alluded to that just a little bit ago about our host program that we roll out. I'm hoping to create a full-time position of that rollout. Right now, like I said, it's twice a week, but there is a need to have it go out 5 days a week. And we're working and we're moving in that direction and hope to have that out here in the next couple of months. But again, it's a funding topic. We get most of that funding through LA County through a grant. The money doesn't go that far because we share that with 45 other agencies. That includes the Sheriff's Department and LAPD. So by the time we see what's left, it's not that much, but we're using that money. As soon as that comes in, we're using it and putting it to good use. So I'll take any questions anyone might have, or we maybe save that to the end.
So we certainly can come back if there's any questions for Carlos or the chief as we continue on here.
Scott, I have a question, and Chief, what is the current, I don't know if it's maybe in your presentation later, but what is the current value to the police department of the public safety parcel tax in dollars?
Just above 2 million.
Thank you.
Exactly what we're budgeting, and I have the figure of the. No, it's just above 2 million. Yeah, so it's 2.1. So also the exact rate, and so we said we have 2.2. So the base year was asked a moment ago about the parcel is 0.03. So the inflator, as you can see, it doesn't just stack. There is a formula to adding the inflator. So as of 2021-22, the just one second, I have a silence. The exact amount is 0.03533. That's right. Okay.
We do have a raised hand from Commissioner Williams. Is there a comment you'd like to make?
Yeah, there is. Hopefully everybody can hear me. I'm talking from my cell phone. As the West Side project takes effect, and as all of these additional parcel taxes take effect, as it relates to public safety, I think it's incumbent upon all of us who are stakeholders in the city to recognize that billions of dollars of investment, new investment in new industries are going to be filtering into Vernon within the next clearly within the next 10 years, if not the next 5 years. And these $1 billion of investment for infrastructure and new industries are going to require a new outlook for the police department to ensure that our city is as safe as it can possibly be. Just as Carlos wants to have the utility rates as low as they possibly can be by 2030, I think the city ought to take a look and have a mandate on itself to be the safest city for industrial development within Southern California, clearly within the same time frame, if not sooner. These Class A multi-billion-dollar facilities are going to bring in people of a completely different mindset than have been up until now. And they are going to demand a city that is clean, that is well policed, and that is at the forefront of maintaining a environment of such a high caliber that the homeless people are not going to be an issue so much as the ability of the police and the ability of the community to recognize that we're not going to tolerate it. Okay, it's just not going to be tolerated. It can be tolerated in LA, but in Vernon, it just cannot be tolerated. There is too much positivity going on here to deal with in my mind, and it may sound callous, probably is callous, but to have a policy that recognizes that that only terrific people are welcome in Vernon. I don't know how you do that politically, and policingly, but there's too much goodness and good things happening in Vernon to tolerate what's been going on over the last 5 years and clearly over the last several months with regard to the lawlessness that we're all experiencing. And if it's a parcel tax that's going to help do it, I'm all in favor of it. That's my comment.
I have a question to Chief Souza. What is the Vernon PD's current policy regarding the homeless?
That's a good question. So just for background, it's not illegal to be homeless. It is illegal for them to trespass, obviously, onto your properties, take shelter within your properties, and commit crimes within Vernon. We do have our challenges because Vernon, is no different than the surrounding areas. It seems to be that they get squeezed in, let's say in LA, for example, and they find their way into Vernon, and then we've got to try to find a way to solve the problem. I can tell you we're thinking of a bunch of different ways. One of the solutions that's on that should be coming and being finalized soon is we've got and secured four beds for homeless individuals that are experiencing homelessness in Vernon over at the Bell Shelter. That is going to be a great tool for the police department, where we can now find places to send these folks to help to try to help them get the help they need. I'll be very frank. Most of these folks that we contact don't want to be helped. They don't want intervention by the police or the mental health or the homeless services that are out there, because they just don't want to play by the rules, so to say. So if we get them a bed at the Bell Shelter, there's rules there, and a lot of them have lived without rules for so long that that they end up not staying there and they end up getting kicked out. Now, in addition to that, and I touched on crime increases. There's a differing view in public safety philosophies in LA County right now, and we are seeing less and less misdemeanor crimes be charged by the district attorney's office. And most of the crimes that are occurring in Vernon are misdemeanors. And when we present those cases to the district attorney, now we're still arresting folks at the same rate that we were. That hasn't been reduced, but we're not getting the cases filed, and we're not holding people accountable. And we got to do a better job of holding people accountable. And it's starting to change slowly. You're starting to see that swing kind of back to what we refer to in public safety, kind of towards the middle. And what's helping with that is the pandemic is starting to open back up. Courts were closed for so long that we weren't holding anybody accountable. So I'll give you an example. We would arrest somebody and they would be released from jail and they wouldn't see a judge for, if they were lucky, in the next 6 to 8 months, or I should say, if we were lucky, in the next 6 to 8 months. And even then they skip out on court. And then now it becomes a warrant and we got to go find them. So as things open back up, as public safety starts to swing a little bit more, where we're starting to hold people accountable, it'll be another tool. So it's multifaceted, right? So we have to hold people accountable. We need to find a solution, which there hasn't been a really good solution yet for homelessness. And the public safety police are in the middle of trying to find a way to balance the two to try to address the problem the best we can to keep Vernon safe. And that's, our goal. It's been my goal for 25 years since I've been here, is to create an environment that is safe for not only the businesses, but the residents and also any future development. So kind of long-winded answer to you, but it's a complicated situation.
I have a follow-up question.
Sure.
Now, I know City of LA receives and received billions of dollars pertaining to homeless, to create, shelters. And I know the City of LA was purchasing motels, and they have some sort of a key program, right? Where they would, house the, homeless, give them access to a, hotel room and all that. Is there something that the city is doing, asking for those, similar funds? I mean, I know we don't have much of a, residential population, but we do suffer, as a whole. Is there any advocacy, legislatively, that we are asking for, maybe like, lobbying the, state legislatures, maybe for some sort of funding, due to the, increase in crime?
Yeah, so I'll say this: LA County holds the money that comes towards fighting homelessness or helping folks that are experiencing homelessness. So LA County will get the money, and then eventually that money gets filtered out. Here in Vernon, we work very closely with the Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority. They're the ones that we go to with the help for whatever may be food, beds, mental health services. We reach out to them. We've also through that system, we've also partnered with the Department of Mental Health. I alluded to that, where we have a clinician that rides around with our officers twice a week currently, hoping to get that up to 5. So yeah, there is money available. The problem is that money needs to be sliced up amongst 45 agencies, police agencies. And I'm just speaking about police. I'm not talking about all the other nonprofits that want portions of that money. So by the time it gets absorbed by some of the larger agencies, there's a little bit left over for Vernon. We maximize what we get. We're pretty fortunate that our city administrator really supports the efforts in that area. But what we address today, and frustrating a little bit for us, is what we address today, that problem reappears a week later because it's a county problem. And we're feeling the effects because crime, homelessness, all that knows no boundaries, knows no borders. So we get the spillover from that. So there is a lot of money out there for homeless services. How it gets divided up, I'm not that decision maker, but to answer your question, we do reach out to those organizations to help us out as much as they can. And they're running around too.
Angela, do you have anything on that? Like, I mean, do you have some sort of a, working group on it, or I don't know, maybe?
So not so much, not specifically on how, there are a lot of things that the other cities are doing that Vernon just, we don't have the makeup in our city to do, like converting motels into temporary housing and contracting with wraparound services, to keep people off the streets. That's a big thing in the other cities, but we don't have abandoned hotels or motels in our city. So we've taken the approach of trying to be creative and get resources to get people help and put them in a chain for those that want help, however small that portion is. We entered into a contract with a number of the Southeast LA cities to jointly fund beds and housing at a Salvation Army shelter in the city of Bell. So that's something that we're doing jointly, sharing the expenses with, I think, 6 other cities in Southeast LA. And they come out and they support PD. They're part of, they participate in the host program. They come out after we do cleanups and help people, into shelters and try and get them services to the extent that they want. But a lot of the things that other cities are doing just don't really work in Vernon because we don't have those resources or housing kind of options to funnel people into. So that's what we're doing on that front, really.
This is Doug Williams again. I think the business community would fund a club van so that the police department could go around Vernon and collect all of the people into the club van and take them to Bell. Okay, I'm in. How many vans do you need?
Well,
I'm not kidding. I'm not kidding. I mean, that's a very creative idea. If the city is in a consortium with the other cities that are converting motels as an incentive to keep people in their cities, hey, let's provide a shuttle service to those cities.
I think the real challenge, as the chief stated, is, these resources only work for those that want help. And there are a lot of them that don't want help. And there are a lot of them that have, that just, for whatever reason, they prefer to live the way that they're living. So there are a ton of resources out there for those that want help. That's not the problem. There are shelters, there are places for them to go to get services and get housing and get temporary shelters. The problem is, dealing with the ones that only want that when the weather's really bad or on a temporary basis, because they go, it stops raining and then they come back. So that's, having a place to take the ones that want help is really not the problem. It's how to deal with the ones that don't want help. And we're limited on our ability to force them to do anything because they are individuals and have a right to live the way that they want to live. It's a challenging situation.
It clearly is. I think we ought to be the politically incorrect city.
Well, I mean, do we have the appropriate anti-vagrancy laws, Chief Souza, to allow you to, efficiently handle these folks? Do we have all the laws that we need so that you, through an enforcement standpoint, not necessarily, I see the constitutional issues that Doug might be bringing up, but so if somebody's, breaking a law, they can be cited, they go into the warrants, they do all that other stuff so that we can then move them. Do we have the laws on the Vernon books to do that?
Yeah, so that's something that we looked at. So we do have the laws on the books. We have anti-camping ordinances. You can't live in RVs in Vernon. We have everything on the books that, as a tool-wise, that I would need. What we all know is that the majority of our homeless are taken up encampments on railroad property. Our ordinances and our laws don't apply on those, in essence, don't apply on those railroad right-of-ways. It's considered federal property. So we've worked with our partners on the railroad side to give us a standing order that if anybody's on a railroad spur, let's say hiding behind a company, it's considered trespassing. But again, there's a process. You got to warn them. And then if you come back and they're still there, then you can, I would love to tell you I could arrest them. But right now, with zero bail and the way that public safety is currently, we cite them and they move on, and sometimes they reappear somewhere else in Vernon or they go to another city. But to answer your question, yes, for public right-of-ways, we have the laws on the books that we need. Most of our issues are along the BNSF-owned property because these folks that are experiencing homelessness use those as a place to hide and set up their encampments.
I have a couple of questions as well. Sorry to drag this out even longer, but just from the finance perspective, maybe this is directed to Scott. What is the value to Vernon PD that we are receiving from the county for homelessness? Do we have a dollar amount that you guys can share with us as to what that is?
Well, from the PD perspective, I can share with you what we received just recently. It ain't much. I can tell you that we got for the last 6 months about $22,000 to use towards overtime to address homelessness specifically.
Okay.
So we are supplementing that through our current deployments and also using some of our overtime where we have some to deploy. So Vernon gets, to answer your question, we get a fraction, a very, very small fraction of what we would need to roll out a full-time team, but we do get some. I'm hoping come July 1 that I can get some additional funding for the city that I can use specifically to target that area of need. But right now it's not enough, to answer your question.
So, maybe I have an unpopular opinion here, but I'm going to share it anyways. While I certainly support law enforcement 100% and agree that you guys are way underfunded and way underappreciated, in my opinion, I feel like we're still having this inequity in Vernon, and I'm going to direct this to you a little bit, Angela, in that we're going to have to raise taxes on business, again, to fund a shortfall of money that we probably should be receiving from the taxes already going to the county and the state. And again, Vernon is perhaps not equitably receiving money versus, millions of dollars going to LA, who doesn't even want to enforce anti-homelessness policies for their businesses. It just seems a little unfair, I think, frankly, to the constituents here in Vernon, which tend to be businesses, that are having to pay these extra monies in order to fund the cities and the cities, programs, because we're not maybe adequately being funded by the property taxes and other things already in place. And I think it's something that we need to address and we need to move towards correcting. And I know, Angela, I'm sure you're already well on your way to doing everything you can for that, but I do think it is a little bit inequitable towards businesses here in the city of Vernon, and it's kind of a turnoff to wanting to bring in new businesses here, I think.
Okay.
Well said.
So I guess my question is, and I mentioned it in the breakfast yesterday, you guys have done a terrific job, particularly over the last 5 years. You are a model city. I mean, you set an example that others can follow, which I think is fantastic, right? With two hands tied behind your back. That's a great thing. You have a target of lowering having your power the lowest by 2030. I think that's a fantastic thing. Nobody knows that other than the 20 people that attended the breakfast yesterday. I think that although not doing away with it, but extending it and resetting it to its original, I don't know, there was a minimum parcel tax, I believe. There was a range on that. Yeah, we had the max at 3 cents, but there was a start rate. Wasn't there on this?
Yes.
Okay. What about resetting it and saying, hey, this is the city that welcomes business, has a target that's good for business. And then I think that folks can get behind, just like you mentioned that the other cities won't give you the 13 cities you have to negotiate with for the same pool of money. They won't give it to you. Obviously it is our money. But this to me is such a statement of good stewardship. It kind of hurts you because you got to give up some dough. But I think that's a win-win for everyone. It also brings to light that, hey, you're thoughtful and doing a terrific job and targeting for businesses. I think that's an attraction to business. I think although your property taxes are only 7% of the assessed value, I did a study, I think it was 2018 or 19, your assessed value was up like $400 million by comparison to the city of Commerce, which was $200 million. I know it's 7% of 1%, but it's big numbers. And I would imagine based as just like Tom had mentioned, real estate market is huge. So I would believe your assessed value is well over $1 billion from just in 2018. Again, it's so it's 1% times 7%, but there's still money that's growing in there. I don't know. It just seems like nobody can argue. We absolutely need to support our police department and the health safety officer full-time. I think that's a brilliant idea. We need to do those things, but can we do it and at the same time get a PR win by extend for less?
And we'll address that. I'll leave the latter to be addressed separately, but I do want to point out that although the AVs are increasing at a very, very significant rate, the formula doesn't adjust our property tax. So as I'm looking at 2019, 20, 21, 22, and the upcoming fiscal year, in 5 years, that property tax, which only represents the secured revenue that's distributed to City of Vernon, it's only just over $4 million. It's increased in those 4 years cited about 300,000. It's
Really?
shocking. I mean, it helps you understand why years ago something had to be done. So you see these assessed values that are off the charts year over year, but that does not translate. The actual increase is a fraction of a fraction, and it's unfortunate. Now we do benefit when businesses install fixtures and permanent heavy machinery and so forth. But again, those tend to be one time. So in the last December, we reported that the assessor, we were relative to percent, we were one of the highest in the county. And again, that just demonstrates all of the good things happening in Vernon. Would that it would translate a little bit in this, what is actually the most stable revenue source for any city is property tax. But unfortunately, the easiest way to understand it is a fraction of a fraction on a year-over-year basis.
All right, thank you, Scott. Surprisingly low, disappointingly low.
It's frustrating. Like, I mean, it is, and to hear what Angela explained, there's limitations, and so much of it really does revolve around outdated laws and policy. But every time we look at something that is outdated because it originated, let's say, in the 1930s, somebody's benefiting from that. And that's the hurdle of trying to get that changed. Doesn't mean it doesn't mean we can't make progress. And it is a priority, and to mention that, but that change doesn't come easy, and those levers are limited to us. So critical needs and potential options. So this revenue source, this enables us to maintain current service levels from primarily our police, but not just police, fire, health. And some of what we have to address. We mentioned in the budget presentation, there are cost escalations that there's nothing we can do anything about. Whether it be the fixed income market or the volatility in the market, we have the ongoing unfunded pension liabilities, and that's just part of the cost of doing business. Providing public safety in a city. We have ongoing labor negotiations. We have several contracts being negotiated, but public safety in the current year. And the goal is a long-term agreement, because that provides stability and predictability for the city, as well as it enables the department to be competitive. There's never been probably never, I would believe, a more challenging time to attract the A players that you want to become part of your local law enforcement. And then this is just for discussion. And on the next slide, we actually have an example of some of the costs. So at this point, this isn't a policy recommendation on my part, I'm just costing it out. And that's the potential of additional staffing. I was asked to cost out the raising minimum staffing. And again, that's part of why this is being brought forward to the commission. So it'd be the staffing and the equipment required. So here's what that looks like. So, and this is just a range. This is not, this is not being specifically brought forward, but it's the reason for 4. And again, I can let the chief discuss the particulars, but 4 provides 1 additional FTE per shift. So the range you see here with the stack bars are the labor costs, as well as any associated equipment and a couple of patrol vehicles. So what that translates to is about just over 800,000 for 4 officers, and that would provide 1 additional officer per shift, and 5, and so on. I'll pause for questions or comments, or we can
Go ahead, Jimmy.
Sorry, yeah, thanks. Chief, what is your current staffing levels per shift, if you can share something like that without obviously compromising your guys' OPSEC?
Yeah, sure. Right now, currently, we deploy 3 officers and 1 supervisor. So simplistically, we have 4 police cars driving around in Vernon at all times. That is considered our minimum staffing. Behind the scenes, you have our criminal investigations and some other details that have additional folks that we can deploy. I wear a uniform every day, so I can deploy also the force multiplier. So during the day, it's 3 plus a supervisor, so 4 cars driving around. With the additional 4 officers, I would be able to deploy an additional police car and a police officer. Our minimum staffing then would increase to 4 police officers and a supervisor. So versus having the 4 police cars driving around, I would have 5 police cars driving around.
Thank you.
All right, well, thank you, everybody. I appreciate it. We'll move on to the next item. Lisa?
Sorry, I was trying to unmute. Couldn't find the button. The next item is.
I'm sorry, Lisa, can I pause you for 1 second?
Sure.
Carlos, I think there was one more slide where you guys were going to present us kind of 3 options. Would you still like us to provide our opinions on which of those we would like, or?
Sure. I was under the impression we were moving in the direction of looking at revamping the tax, like Jack Klein and kind of said. But let's talk about that and make sure that we're on the same path.
Scott, you're currently muted.
Thank you. Sorry. All right. So for the commission's consideration, So there is the one option is simply the preservation of the existing parcel tax. And, per the chief's narrative, this will protect a level of funding for critical response times and service to the business community. The other relates to those, to the bar charts we looked at, and that would be if there was a recommendation for additional levels of staffing, that would involve, or a recommendation would be to actually increase the rate. And then, of course, there is a possibility of just allowing it to expire. That would be significant, but it would as this is sunsetting, that is certainly a possibility. So I'll pause there for discussion.
Can I ask one question real quick? So I think earlier you had said that there was about a 2.1 million value or so. And then, so if we were looking at doing an increase, right, for either 4, 5, or 6 officers, I mean, 6 officers is just shy of 1.2 million, I think. So what, if we were looking at, so if the current value is 0.035 and change, right? What would you need to do as an increase to reach this 4, 5, or 6? Are we talking, because I know that out of that 3 cents, it goes to other departments as well. Would we be looking at a full doubling of that, like to 6 cents? Or are we looking at like a fraction of that, like maybe 1 cent more? Or do you have any sort of idea what that would need?
I'll have staff compute that for accuracy. It wouldn't double, because that's not how the formula works. And as you can see, I don't think I think our fire contract is set. I think we are there is it's working. That was put in place, and as Carlos mentioned yesterday, it's working pretty terrific. And I think we have some enhancements built into the current budget for our health department. So this is really, if you're talking an additional $1 million a year, yes, that would be 50% of the current level of revenue, but that would be a very robust increase should the community support that, desire that. But it's even less than that to add 1 per shift. So again, I'll have staff compute what exactly that would look like in terms of the amount. But those are the absolute dollars that we're suggesting.
Thank you for that. At least I'll, Jack, if I can express my opinion on it, I certainly believe we should not allow it to sunset. I definitely support at least preserving what we're doing now. But if Chief Sousa thinks that we need additional officers to conduct the mission, I'd certainly be in favor, depending on some sort of analysis of what that actually would look like, in terms of cost of the businesses. But, if we need to fund the police department, we need to fund the police department. Again, though, I still think that we need to look at other legislative avenues as well to bring back some of our tax dollars that we're paying out to other cities, through the county's distribution and the state's distribution back to Vernon. But that's just my thoughts.
Does anyone else have some thoughts on this? All right, are there any other questions for the staff?
So we will bring back some of the particulars in terms of what those costs would specifically look like for those levels of service that were provided. But I'll pass on to Carlos here, who can comment on the overall.
So do we understand the direction, Scott?
I don't think so. I mean, I have a different
I don't
opinion
have a
than
good-
Doug and as
Again-
well as Jimmy.
Yeah, I think we have to basically understand like the options to add police officers in the streets. I think we were giving you the numbers. If we wanted to add, 6 total police officers, it would add about $1.2 million to this year's budget, but that would grow exponentially. So in talking with the chief, we don't necessarily think that that's the best option moving forward, but we wanted to bring that to the commission so that they can understand what the cost is of bringing in extra officers. So I think what we're going to do as staff, and if you disagree with this, then just let me know now. We're going to go back, we're going to reevaluate it, and maybe try to reset the cost of the parcel or of the tax to its original amount, and then put together a plan of how many years we're going to ask for that, and just reset it. So basically, we'll be resetting whatever cost of living adjustments we've made to it over the last couple of years, which would be 9 years. So, and see what the original tax amount would be. Is that something that you want to see?
Well, I think, Carlos, I think for sure nobody wants to see any kind of diminishment in services, none whatsoever. And if it's going to cost more, sounds like, there's some energy that would suggest, an appropriate amount more already of, inflation adjusted, if that can't keep up, this, I mean, to me, we do need our security, and we do understand it's a bigger world out there than, maybe 10 or 20 years ago. So.
Okay.
I don't want to overplay that hand, but 10 years ago, costs are not static, but this is particularly felt in the last 5 years. And it's those two elements of just cost escalations themselves, as well as pensions. So it's just something for the commission to consider as we bring back what the numbers look like. It's very difficult in any comparison to take absolute dollars from a decade ago.
Oh yeah, no, I was just talking about the ability to provide a safe environment is much different today and requires a lot more resources than it would 10 years ago, just because of all, the lack of enforcement by the DA, the increase in homelessness. I mean, there's all kinds of new issues that didn't exist really 10 years ago. All right.
Jack, I'd like to, Tom Condon, one observation that I have is just in my dealings with clients over the years in Vernon, the warehouse tax, I kind of look at, the warehouse tax is for warehouse companies. The special safety tax is for the manufacturers, as I understand it. And is that correct? That's how it gets divided up. Warehouse tax is for warehousers.
And the others that's how I understand it.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, they're not all classified
Right.
as one of the other. That's right.
And so just an observation from kind of the thoughts and comments that I've heard from owners and tenants in the city of Vernon, the warehouse tax, if you took 100,000 square feet of land as an example, is going to cost $35,000 a year. If you take this special parcel tax and you apply it to 100,000 of land, it's $3,000 a year. So I think we want to make sure the city does the right thing from a safety perspective. And just one observation that I would, again, it's not a license to just spend money, but there's always pushback on the warehouse tax that I hear from owners and tenants quite often. And I very rarely hear people complain about the safety tax, because it's not as significant. And I'm just making an observation.
Yeah, well, and that's reflected in the budget. They are very significantly different levels assessment.
So, and my point is that if the city feels that, and the police chief feel that we need more, for safety, then I think I would be open to that, and I think the community would. In general. Thank you.
All right.
So in terms of direction, so there's a couple things we can bring back. I'll, as Carlos directs, so we'll get that put together and we'll bring that back before the commission.
That would be great. I think that would be helpful. And then
Okay,
the
and it'll be
commissioners will
both.
give you a better.
It'll be both operational and financial impact, because obviously the recommendation, there's a range. It doesn't have to be there. There's a number of different ways this can be sliced and addressed. It doesn't have to fit in one of those stacked bars.
Okay, terrific. Thank you very much.
Jack, if I could just ask for one more thing from staff as well. When you come back to bring this back, could we just maybe get a comparison from the chief on neighboring jurisdictions and how many staff they have, and and their comparative size to Vernon, just so that can help us see if we really need one additional officer, no additional officers, 2 additional officers, whatever it may be. That would be helpful.
Yeah, Jimmy, this is Doug. And if I could make an additional comment, I think we can't look at today as a benchmark and as a milestone. I think we have to forecast what is the city going to look like 5-10 years from now, and build for that. New industries are coming in. The West Side plan is going to alter significantly what is of Vernon, and the requirements for police, for continued patrols, if in fact the city is going to have eateries and high density commercial and these data centers that are going in, that are going to bring in people with completely different mindsets on what they want to have in a city where they're going to put a massive investment. We've got to deliver and vision what their mindset is and what we should be building for, so that it happens for and we can deliver it as a city 8 years out. I mean, we've been talking about the growth mindset and how we're going to turn this city around for quite a long time, and it's starting to happen. I mean, it is happening, and it's terrific. And to keep that momentum going, the city will need to convince its corporate citizens that to be here, it's not just power that's going to be the issue. It's going to be cleanliness, safety, security, so your employees can walk outside and walk down the street and go get lunch without having to step over people and their abodes. That's just the reality of things. In my opinion, that's just my opinion. I mean, I was in San Francisco a couple of weeks ago. You don't want Vernon to look like San Francisco, okay? And whatever the hell we got to do to make it not look like San Francisco, that's what we have to do.
You don't want to be in LA. I was in there yesterday.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you go across the street and it's, look, Jack, you guys are working hard to bring guys into Vernon. Condon's working hard to bring guys into Vernon. If you deliver a pristine city, your job is that much easier.
I hear you, Doug. Maybe a shorter sunset on this next one, so you can reevaluate as you get into that 5-10 years out, might also be an appropriate thing, not just spring this for 10.
Yeah,
because our needs will change.
Yeah, I agree. But it's, we're polishing it up, and it's looking good. It's looking real good. And I congratulate everybody who is doing their job at City Hall to make it all happen. We've all worked very hard to have that conversation, and it's happening, and I love it. I really do. I really do. You know, I give you anecdotes down the road of what I used to do. It's not gonna take the time today, but you know, if you don't if you don't want to tolerate it, don't tolerate it. It's just what it is.
Yeah, I just think it's important, Doug, you know, that we have today's comparison to start with so that we can see, you know, what it is going forward. Obviously, none of us are experts in public safety, you know, other than Chief
No, we're
Sousa
not.
here. So we
Of
need
course
to
not.
we need to have those numbers so that we can look at it, and then we need to have, you know, obviously the chief's input, you know, as to what he realistically thinks we need, and we just need to be good stewards of the dollars that we're having to pay on top of the tax dollars we're already paying to the state and the county, you know, to make sure that, you know, if we're going to be inequitable about it, at least we're being knowledgeable in that inequity. So
I wholly agree with you, Jimmy.
I for one agree with my peers here, and I think one thing that would down the road, hopefully, fingers crossed, would definitely help is we need a new DA, and hopefully some strong enforcement on their part would really, I think, help. I think the whole county basically. And the with my talks to various captains in Hollywood, Venice, LA, I hear that they don't even charge people anymore. It's because they put so much effort into it and it just goes all to waste. And so I think I think once we have the new DA, somebody who's smart and is not going to tolerate and set some enforcement, I think that will definitely help. I don't want the parcel tax to expire. I think we need to give the funding to Vernon PD, and we want to take a look at the baseline numbers with the original parcel tax, and then see what we need, and then I would definitely, I think the business community will support that, even if there's a minor increase. I think they will still support it. We do need Vernon to remain safe for sure.
Agreed.
So we have plenty of points of analysis. I've jotted a number of notes down in terms of operational, an array of potential levels of staffing, analysis from the chief, comparative agencies, the fiscal impact itself, what the various sunsets might look like, as well as the original baseline. So we've got some work cut out to bring back to the commission.
Okay. It's suggesting that I ask for a motion. Is there?
No motion.
Okay, yeah.
So moved.
Okay.
No onto oral report.
All right. Well, are there any reports from the commission or staff?
I do have an oral report. So yesterday, I'm pleased to announce that we had the first business Vernon Business Breakfast. We invited the business community to come in. We had several attendees attend. Vernon, it's something that we want to continue to do and do outreach with our community and make sure that they're abreast of all the different things that are going on in the city and giving them information. So we were able to discuss this parcel tax. We were able to discuss certain items with Project Westside and the direction that the city's going. So the next one is scheduled for November 9th at 8 a.m. if anyone would like to attend. The EIR scoping meeting, we missed it, but it is available online. So if you go to our city website, you'll be able to get the link and you can watch the scoping meeting. It happened started at 10 o'clock, and I think it's also completed. Upcoming job fair will be Thursday, June 23rd from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. at Vernon City Hall. Looking forward to see if we can match any local jobs seekers with Vernon businesses. So we invite the business community to come in and look for new employees. And then the economic development outreach, in an effort to ramp up its economic development outreach to Vernon businesses, the city will be making available contact forms on the city website, and will invite businesses to share their various company leaders and contact information, general company information, and type of operation. The data will be collected so that the city staff will have a better understanding of how it meets their business needs. So because we know that good communication is important, we ask that you consider partnering with the city and giving and assisting us with this. That's all I have. Thank you very much.
Carlos,
thank you.
Jack, if I ask one question, sorry, Carlos, is there like a business information listserv that you guys have in the city? I had no idea there was a business breakfast. You know, I would love to get on the list to be notified about some of these things.
Sure, we're putting together a contact list, and we'll make sure that you're made aware of the next one.
Thanks so much.
You know, if you paid your dues to the Chamber of Commerce, you would have got that email.
All right, without any further business, I adjourn this meeting at 11:08. Thank you,
Jack.
everyone. Take care.
Thanks,
Bye.
everybody. Bye now.
Goodbye.